Let's do this Crowder thing. Increasingly, you will see more and more reports coming out, because obviously we're further down the line, of the implications of long COVID, and of not even what I think you could necessarily call long COVID, but the long-term implications of COVID on things like increase in sort of heart disease. It appears that like COVID has the ability to impact almost like every part of the body, every system in the body. It is, the COVID numbers are up, and we saw this coming. There are a couple of markers, the biggest one, of course, being sewage. They test the sewage, and it becomes a leading indicator for spikes in COVID. A month and a half ago, maybe, I think I had mentioned on the program that they had started to see in different cities around the country spikes in the sewage. There's another one, apparently, another sort of indicator that is not quite as scientific. Well, it's not as scientific. It's more social science. But there apparently is a candle on Amazon, a vanilla-scented candle. And researchers found that every time that as a leading indicator for a spike in COVID, this particular candle gets an upshot in bad reviews that say it doesn't have a strong scent. And that indicator went off. And then you can just look at the I mentioned this on the graph, that we are now higher in terms of hospitalizations. We have no idea how many cases are out there. Higher in terms of hospitalizations than our low ebb. So that back in last year, in 2022, I think it was in April maybe, we hit our low ebb, and we're now higher than that. We were at a lower ebb a couple of months ago, but now we're higher than that ebb. I never really stopped wearing my mask on the subway, for instance. When I'm in a cab, I roll the windows down, I wear a mask. When I get into an airplane, at least, on that long trip I took, I didn't wear it through the whole trip, but I wear it in the beginning and in the end of the thing when I'm not as convinced that the air conditionings are going. I think they're starting to run them now when you first get on the plane, but and you know how hard it is to maintain that regimen? Not hard at all.
But think of how hard it is for other people who don't want to wear masks when they see you wearing them, and then they have to feel like they're irresponsible or something.
But here is the other thing. There are people who I think even the most COVID denying will acknowledge who are more susceptible to getting COVID and being really hurt by it than you. And you can decrease the chances of them getting COVID by wearing a mask in those situations where it's close quarters. And it costs you nothing. It's so easy to do. Masks don't make it absolutely, like, for instance, there's also like the example of like condoms. Condoms are not 100% either. Condoms.
Well, why do you call them birth control then?
Exactly.
Don't lie to me. Now I can't trust anything.
I give you Steven Crowder, who must have like, God knows where he feels comfortable talking, what he feels comfortable talking about these days. Because, all the rumors about his, why there were problems in his marriage, and then all of the things that we know that were problems in his marriage, and all of the problems with his telling his workplace, telling them, like, if you can't handle having someone smack their penis on your face, this is not the place for you, and all the NDAs. What's left to talk about? Well, I don't know. Go back to when you were riding high, and I give you Steven Crowder complaining about COVID coming back and the idea that Some places are reinstituting mask requirements.
You've heard them say that masks save lives. And in case you haven't heard it recently, because the science, or really just science, right? Not the science copyright. Science says that it's not correct. Here's a reminder of what it sounded like then.
The CDC is now recommending that people, including those vaccinated, go back to wearing masks indoors in regions of the country that are seeing substantial or high rates of COVID-19
Now pause
spread.
it just for 1 second. We can skip through maybe this compilation because it is just that it's people, it's newscasters saying, "Oh yeah, we're experiencing a spike. Maybe we take some measures for separation so the virus doesn't spread as much." I mean, if we want to sample some of them, we can, but
No, we don't need to because
we can move right to crowd.
95.
Don't let COVID win. Wear a mask.
I love the science, right? Mr. Fauci there.
Such an idiot.
Just immediately making a logical leap. If the science shows that one condom helps, then two would just make sense. Never mind the friction would cause them to create micro tears.
Currently, right now, Lionsgate has a mask mandate that they just put back into effect for, I believe, their Santa Monica offices. Anybody that goes into the office has to have a mask. And a university in Atlanta basically said, we're going to mask for the next 2 weeks. There's no parties. Yeah, that's going to work on a college campus. No parties.
pause
Or
it for a
large
second. I want you to think for a moment. Just think about, like, what is the most nefarious reason you can think of that this one office, Lionsgate, and then this school in Atlanta, across the country, they're so infected by wokeness that they want the maskness. Now, also, I want you also to contemplate, like, the most nefarious reason, and then who gives a shit?
First of all, like, and I like they're going to get to it, but like Lionsgate, yeah. Why do you think they wanted to do the mask mandate? Crowder suggests it's to like. Well, let's let him play it a little bit.
Offices. Anybody that goes into the office has to have a mask. And a university in Atlanta basically said, we're going to mask for the next 2 weeks. There's no parties. Yeah, that's going to work on a college campus. No parties or large gatherings. And everybody has to go back to wearing a mask. So we're not talking like this is, again, Alex Jones was.
It's happening with private companies, but again, that's just, they're testing it. What's the science?
So pause it. Like now they're just testing it. That's like a trial balloon. Biden's like, Lionsgate, we need you to test this biomedical.
Biden's sitting in the White House like, we need to get 2 tests on
Trial
this to
balloon.
see if these sheep will go back to the regime so that we can continue. That's the way won the election last time. And the way we're going to win it this time is by not going to be able to tell. Are they smiling when they talk about Biden, or are they frowning? We're going to put the mask back on. Chief mask czar of the Biden administration.
Guess what?
Who are the 2 candidates that you have isolated who could start to test this out? Well, we have done some research and we found the Lionsgate office in Santa Monica is a great cross-section of people to tell if they'll be authoritarian sheep. And what we're also doing is the exact same latitude all the way across the country in Atlanta at a college. And once we can determine from the uptake of mask requirements there, we'll be able to roll this out for the entire country. Just don't let Alex Jones hear a word of this or he's going to blow our cover.
Just an update on this Lionsgate sort of trial run for the next crackdown. Lionsgate on Friday notified employees that the mask mandate instituted about a week ago, this is last Friday, for the 3rd and 5th floors of the studio's 5-story office building in Santa Monica is ending. And it's because...
I know why. Because Crowder reported on it and they realized they're going to have to roll back the experiment.
Here's what the official sort of line is, but that's even more plausible. But as Deadline explained in a follow-up to our original story about Lionsgate, the orders for such temporary mask measure requirements at companies with active outbreaks come from public health based largely on Cal OSHA regulations. And the company,
big government authoritarianism.
Yeah, I mean, but then that sort of big government told them, actually, they're like the cases that you found in that building that prompted this sort of thing, there's no more cases, so you can carry on.
Well,
So, yeah, I mean, I would think
we keep watching.
maybe Lionsgate made that decision because they don't want to lose work days because their employees have COVID.
Of course.
Go back to wearing a mask. So we're not talking like this is, again, Alex Jones was.
It's happening. with
Alex
private
Jones
companies, but
was
again,
right.
That's just, they're testing it. What's the science? What science do we have on masks now? Well, let me just rapid fire this for you and the references are available.
Yeah, you better.
Okay. Key fact here, number 1. Masks, we now know, can actually, and by can, I mean are actually poisonous. So here's a new study that came out here in the last couple of weeks. Researchers at Junebuk University, their K94, which by the way are very similar to the N95 masks, they were found to release high levels of volatile organic compounds. You've heard the term TVOC, right? So 8 times the recommended safety limit.
Yeah. We think that sounds bad.
8 times.
Pause it just to address that. I'm reading from the conclusion here. As the number of problems that require mask wearing, including air pollution and COVID-19, grows, masks are increasingly important. Now that masks are all but required, the harmful chemicals that can be released from them must be evaluated. So that's the.
So in other words, it is.
It's not just masks are poisonous. Stuff. Take them off.
It is. We may want to be more conscientious about the way we're making these masks.
Yes, because we can't. I guess we can't trust the free market for that. That's weird.
That is so strange.
EOC, right? So 8 times the
And
recommended
and also, we should also be clear, like, the reports like that come out not just because of COVID, but because of anticipating we're probably going to have more of these pandemics.
Yeah.
And also, we're going for days with smoke in the air because of wildfires.
Exactly.
And
these things are efficient for that?
They're not. Masks aren't efficient, but we want to make sure that they're not made with bad chemicals because we're never going to wear them anyways.
We think that sounds bad.
8 times is more than 7. But in this case, it's bad. So can we just round that down to 0? No, Fauci, you can't just manipulate it anymore. Blah! Here's key fact number 2. Okay, masks, we now know. Remember we did this in schools? They hurt children in a multitude of ways, measurable ways, quantifiable ways.
One of the ones that pisses me off the most.
Remember they would always say, hey, what harm is it? Oh, if we lock everything down, look, it's just a safety measure. At this point, err on the side of safety, as though there were no consequences.
Okay, pause it. You see that shift he just made? Yeah. He went from masks to lockdowns and not going into schools. Now, there is no doubt that COVID hurt children's learning. And you know what else hurt children's learning? Having their parents die.
Yeah, this is from April 8th from The Guardian. An estimated 245,000 children in the U.S. have lost one or both parents to COVID.
It also turns out that children, for cases of COVID that were contracted in the home, children were the vector 70% of those instances. So something like 16 to 20% of COVID was contracted in people's homes. 16% of the cases. Now, obviously not the first case, because the first case is contracted outside the home. But when people caught it in a home, 70% of the time that case arised in a home, it was because the kid had brought it home. And again, short of the first couple of months where it was locked down, nobody was saying we don't want to send kids into school. We said nobody wants to send kids into school unless there are proper precautions taken. Now, in this room, what we did is we had a screen, a plastic screen. We still have some of the vestige of the wire that I hooked up there that went in between Emma and I. We both had HEPA air filters on both sides. We had a HEPA air filter over there. I have a big box fan with a, what is it called? Like a 13 RG filter or whatever it is. And the door was open and I had a meter that could tell us like what the CO levels were in here, which was a proxy for how much fresh air is circulating. Had we done that in schools or had the ability to do that in schools, it would have been much better for kids to go back to school. But he switches, incidentally. Kids showing up at school and kids wearing masks. Masks was one way you could get kids back into school.
One of them, yeah. And to the extent that, like, look, the science on masks, it seems like the meta studies I've seen seem like, yeah, generally this is pretty useful. It's hard to know exactly how useful, like whether in a lab situation or in public, but like from precautionary.
Well, it's also a function of like, who has COVID in the room?
Right.
Because a huge percentage of COVID was transmitted by some individuals who, for whatever reason, we don't know yet why, they were sort of like super spreadery type of people. But if you have other types of people, does a mask, and a mask probably helps inhibit it there too.
But like to the extent there's any sort of slightly misleading thing coming from the state, it's that masks protect you more than they actually did because they wanted to keep the economy back up and running.
They inflated how safe you were with just wearing a mask.
Yeah, and I say that as somebody who wears masks.
Good.
Is it? Oh, if we lock everything down, look, it's just a safety measure. At this point, err on the side of safety, as though there were no consequences, as though fundamentally altering our economy was not a consequence. Hey, look, err on the side of safety, right? So kids do their class by Zoom a little bit. How did masks hurt them? Well, lockdowns hurt them mentally, by the way. We've now seen record numbers of inhibited emotional development.
Masks.
We've seen slower language development. Also, if kids wear the mask too long, they could end up looking like this. That's a problem that we deal with.
Let's take this seriously.
Psychologically, we've seen increased anxiety. We've seen increased stress. We've also seen, by the way, children from these lockdown periods in masks, as they go into adulthood and into university, we've seen higher substance abuse. We've seen higher rates of mood disorders. By the way, to a statistical degree that couldn't be explained any other way. And when you add all of these together that follow the same trend, that's where you see a very clear causation. We also have very physical manifestations. Breathing discomfort that kids went through, skin disorders, headaches. These increased dramatically. Fact number 3. According to the Cochrane report,
The what?
I get it. I know. We are all children.
Cochrane, not ring. So
Right.
10 studies took place in the community, 2 studies in healthcare workers. Compared with wearing no mask in the community studies only, wearing a mask may make a little to no difference in how many people caught a flu-like illness or COVID-like illness. We've had many studies here. This is another key point according to Oxford epidemiologist Tom Jefferson, not the guy who,
Wait a second.
Not Thomas.
I know, it's
Tom.
confusing.
He's an Oxford man?
Yeah, Tom Jefferson. There is just no evidence that they, meaning masks, make any difference, full stop, just to be clear.
boom.
That's not-
Go read that article, by
And
the way.
here's something else, just to be clear. There was no difference between masking and not masking school districts. There was no statistical difference. The best that you can find is maybe, just to be clear, and you know what else didn't work? Social distancing like this. This is something we
Let's
actually did.
go on to so he grants that there's a lot of maybes because that's actually where the science is on this. I'm looking, this is from a week ago, the Royal Society, allowing for uncertain and variable evidence, which is why this is so difficult. It's really difficult to study these things because you can't control for all the confounding factors, like what the difference is between schools that get COVID and don't. But we concluded that wearing higher quality masks and mask mandates generally reduce SARS-CoV-2 transmission in these study populations. So he's lying.
Also, the editor-in-chief of the Cochrane Library literally issued a statement saying that, per the Scientific American, that the takeaways were, in quote, not an accurate representation of what the review found.
How the Cochrane review went wrong. Report questioning. This is from the Star in Canada. Questioning COVID mask blows up prompts apology.
The science. I mean, the science. It's just science.
The idea that masks don't help slow COVID is an, quote, inaccurate and misleading interpretation of the report they published in January. Carla Soares-Weiser, editor-in-chief of the Cochrane Library, wrote in an update posted to their website on Friday.
Huh.
Its own editor-in-chief is like...
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go, Stephen.
But thanks for walking us through those 3 facts.
Exactly. Amazing. Just amazing.
Yeah.
Fauci retired months ago, incidentally.
It's literally not even fair.
Did Kurtz Metzger also do a mask thing? Effing idiot.
Yeah, moron.
He's an idiot. Stupid idiot.